Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Canon PowerShot G3X bridge camera, going over all the buttons, doors, menus, and features. Let's get started. The Canon G3X is a high-end bridge camera with a 1-inch 20-megapixel sensor. It can capture both RAW and JPEG images, has 31 autofocus points, touchscreen that doubles as a selfie screen, and has a continuous drives at almost 6 frames per second. This camera also has a zoom of 25 times, or the equivalent to a 24-600 lens, with a 2.8 to 5.6 aperture availability, and image stabilization. This camera is great for those who want a good zoom in a package that has a lot of fun features to explore. In today's walkthrough, we will explore the layout, buttons, and doors so you can familiarize yourself with the new camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So as you can see, the front of the camera is very simple. There are a couple buttons on the lens, which we will go over here. But plainly on the front, you can see we have the model and the maker, so Canon G3X. On the front of the lens, it does display the 25 times image stabilization, so you can see that if I kind of bump this, you'll see that moving around. That's the image stabilization to kind of help with typical body shake that you'll have. It does show that it's a 2.8 to 5.6 variable aperture lens, which means at its widest point of the 24mm mark, you'll be able to reach a 2.8 aperture, but you zoom out to the 600 point, it'll be a 5.6, so just keep in mind that you'll be losing light as you zoom. This button here is so you can actually set it to a set zoom point. I believe that for factory, it is set halfway. So if you were to turn on the camera and you were to hit this button, it's automatically going to zoom out to the 85 mark, or a little bit more than that. And then you can and then if you don't want it to zoom out, you just have to zoom on back with your zoom lever here by your shutter button. This button here, the MF, it stands for manual focus. So what that is going to allow us to do is if we were to turn this around, hit this button, that's going to allow us to zoom in quite a bit, and then use the ring here on the front of the camera to actually focus. Then going to the sides of the camera where we'll find some doors. We have one little door here, which is going to give us a, let's see. So this door here is going to give us a port for remote control, so you can use a wired remote. We have a USB connection here, which is going to allow you to transfer images from the camera to your computer or upgrade firmware if there is an upgrade. And we have our HDMI port. This, of course, is going to be to connect to your TV or computer screen to show like a slideshow of photos, something like that. Then it just clicks right back in place. On the other side of the camera here, we do have a few more doors. And a switch. So this switch next to the lightning bolt here means this is going to be our pop-up flash. That's going to be this guy here. And when we don't want to use it, all you got to do is push it back down. Then we do have this door here, which is going to be our mic and headphone port. Now this camera does only shoot in HD video. It doesn't do 4K. So this is an older model. I don't know if Canon plans on releasing a newer model of this, but it's a high possibility considering that, this is a few years old. But still does great quality overall, unless you're going to really be blowing it up to, a 4K television, to, a projector onto a wall, anything like that. You don't really need 4K video. HD still does perfectly fine. And then of course we have symbols here that indicate that NFC and Wi-Fi is available on this camera. So you can connect it to the Canon app, transfer images to your phone from the camera, and also use your phone as a remote control for this guy. Going to the bottom of the camera, you can see that this is actually going to be our Actually this one is. This is going to be our universal tripod mount. This part here, I'm actually not positive what this guy is for. So I'm going to have to do some research on that, but you happen to just know, go ahead and leave a comment below, and you know, that way it can be answered for everybody. And we have a little door here. This guy is going to be able to hold our battery and our SD card. Now there is a picture here, if it will come up, of the direction to put the SD card in, because there is a corner on every SD card that is cut off. So it lets you know what direction to put the card in correctly. And then for this battery here, there really is, you know, only one way to put this in. You're really not going to mess up on that. You just want to make sure that you line up the contacts with the contacts inside, and then you should be all set and ready to go. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start with the top of the camera here. So we've already kind of gone over this. This is going to be our pop-up flash. Again, that is triggered by the little switch here on the side. We do have a hot shoe availability or cold shoe, depending on what you're using it for. So when you plug your mic in, you can hook it to the top of this by just sliding this door out, hooking that in there. Or else you can use a external mic by putting that, or else you can use a external flash, which you can then adjust the angle, get something that looks a little bit more natural when it comes to lighting, because unfortunately pop-up flashes, they're not the best. You know, they're there in situations where you absolutely need some extra lighting, but nothing that is going to get you something that of great quality, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and start going over our mode dial here. So we'll start just at the top and we'll kind of go around. So our C1 and C2 buttons are going to be custom buttons. So for situations where maybe you do video or photography in a set lighting situation, you can actually set custom settings to this. So, you know, say I do my videos like here, I always use the same white mat, I use the same lighting every time, and I found the perfect settings, right? So, and then I go and take pictures at an event, or I, you know, go for a walk and I want to take pictures on my walk, and then I come back and I want to continue. Well, instead of having to refine those perfect settings, all I have to do is switch to C1 or C2. So the next one here is going to be M. This is going to be full manual mode. If you're, you know, just getting into photography, if you were just looking for something that's going to get you better pictures than your phone, or just a typical point and shoot camera, I don't expect you to be on manual mode very much, or even at all, but just know that it is available if you have been into photography and you do fully understand your shutter speeds and apertures. Perfect. You know, it'll give you a way to fine tune your settings. AV is going to be aperture variable. That's going to control the opening in the lens. It'll control your depth of field, that blurry background, sharp foreground, and light intake. The TV is going to stand for time variable. That's going to be to control your shutter speed. So if you want to capture motion as a still or show motion, and then letting the camera figure out the aperture. Your P mode is your program mode. That's going to be your first step off of auto. So it's just going to generally be, it's going to give you an automatic recommendation of what it, you know, is telling you, hey, these are the settings I recommend for this to come out as a good exposure, but allows you to change certain settings from there. And it helps you out along the way. So P is just a good general mode to be on when you don't necessarily have a goal of what you're taking pictures of. If you're first getting started with this camera, you probably just want to be in auto mode. So hybrid auto. Hybrid auto is going to be like you can do video but also take pictures at the same time. Auto is just mainly focused on either pictures or video. Keep in mind that you can do, this does have a video mode, but you can do video in any of your manual settings, your hybrid auto or your auto. All you have to do is press this red button here. So you press once to start recording, you press again to stop recording. The whole purpose of this little video camera here, this movie mode, is it gives you a little bit you know, more options to choose from when it comes to like mic display and things like that. Anyway, so auto itself is letting the camera have full control. So this is going to be a good mode to be in if you're first starting out with this camera or you don't really understand these modes quite yet. It's a good way to just get familiar with where the buttons are, that sort of thing, while you're learning it. And, you know, say you're exploring in your A, B, T, V, P modes, and it gets frustrating and you're just like, it's not doing what I wanted to. Auto is always there. You know, use auto as your default because it's more important to get the shot than to worry about, you know, proper settings. So this mode here with the multiple frames, typically on any other camera, this would be a continuous drive. However, this is actually a creative shot mode on this camera, which for me, I'm not a huge fan on. If it's something you want to play with, please go for it. But essentially what it does is it gives you kind of a choice, you know, let's see, so the camera auto selects from single color effects, from distinct and bold effects, with natural tones, from all effects. So what happens if, say, I took a picture of, say, my mouse and my keyboard. You can see that it took multiple shots, but also took pictures in like multiple colors and effects. And then it would let you choose later on, like, oh, I really liked how that black and white one came out, or something like that. It's definitely kind of a unique option for bridge cameras. It's not usually something that you find. Here we have our sports mode. That's going to be for continually moving objects. We have our scene mode, which has pretty much everything else other than sports. So if we were to adjust this here, if you're in your scene mode and you want to pick a specific scene, you have to hit your Q for quick menu, which we'll go over more here in a moment. You can do smart shutter, star effect, handheld night scene, snow, fireworks. So they're essentially going to be auto presets to very specific situations. So, you know, it is something to play with there. The 2 circles is going to be high dynamic range, which for me, I don't know if I would really play with this option a bunch, but that's mainly because I do Photoshop, so I like to adjust all of my colors and contrasts and all of that after the fact, after I shoot in RAW, which is capable with this camera. But if you're just learning to play with your camera, if you're just shooting in JPEG, you're not wanting to edit your pictures in Photoshop anytime soon, you know, go ahead, play with it. It's, you know, if you don't like it, you can always delete it, and that's the great thing about digital. And then, of course, we have our video mode. So for the rest of the walkthrough, I'm going to be set on our P mode because it's going to actually show the most in our menus and our quick menus of what's available on this camera. If you have it set to auto, where the camera has full control, you actually have less settings that you can change. So I just want you to see what's available. Here we have an adjustment wheel. So this is going to be to adjust, like if you're on your AV mode, that's going to be to adjust aperture. TV mode is going to be to adjust shutter speed, etc. We have our on and off button here. This, of course, is going to be our shutter button. So you push halfway down to focus, you push all the way down to take the picture. This, of course, is going to be our zoom. So again, you can zoom out all the way to the 600 mark and then zoom all the way back to the 24 mark. So it does indicate on the lens where exactly you're at, if there's ever a question of how far you're out. And then this dial here is actually going to be our exposure dial. So if you go +1, it's actually going to make the scene brighter. If you go -1 or -2, 3, it's going to make it darker. So if you're in a situation where you're just like, oh, I need this a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, without changing any major settings, you can just adjust this dial. Okay, so getting to the back of the camera here. Here we do have a tilt and flip screen, which is cool. Hi. You can get different angles here, from higher up, from, you know, low down. You know, it's a really nice option to have when it comes to taking pictures. This is also a touch screen, which is really nice. So you can pinpoint where you would like to focus. So then you can set. So on this camera, or on most cameras anyway today, you should have a quick menu. So on this specific camera, it's listed as a Q up here in the corner. So your quick menu is built so you shouldn't ever really have to go into your actual menu. You know, I think we've all been there where we're trying to find something in our menu and it's buried in there and it's hard to find, and then you lose your moment on taking your picture. So your quick menu gives you all of the available things that you should just change right away if it comes to that situation, and you don't have to dive into your menu and try and figure it out. So kind of going over this, the first thing up here is actually going to be your autofocus modes. So you have regular autofocus, and then you have like face and tracking autofocus, which is kind of neat. So just depends on what you're shooting there. You have your quality that you'll be taking pictures in. So if you're shooting in JPEG, you definitely want to stay in the L range. You want to have the largest quality possible. For me, I like taking pictures in RAW because it gives me more control over lighting and shadows and whatnot, which in our B-roll footage, as you can see, there are a lot of variables to consider. You have your movie quality, so you know, your HD, you know, just different frame rates. You have your timer, which for me, I'm definitely going to want to for the B-roll sessions, because I don't have a remote for this guy. Set it for like a 2-second delay. That way, you know, I don't get any shake to the camera in those low light situations. An ND filter. Now, ND stands for neutral density. This is going to be helpful for video, especially in really light situations where you just need it a little bit darker. You have your ratio size, which 3:2:4:3 is going to be the most popular. We have our white balance. Now, white balance in an everyday situation is just really good about keeping it in AWB, auto white balance. This is, I mean, cameras have come a long way in the last 5-10 years to where auto white balance is really good at determining what is going to be true white. You can set it to like sunny, shady, cloudy, whatever you want to do. That's going to give you a warmer or cooler image if you want to be a little bit more creative. But you always need to remember to set it back to auto white balance, or change it if you're going to a different lighting situation, because then you could come out with blue or orange people. So something to keep in mind there. And it looks like these here are turned off. In between, that looks like it's going to be different color adjustments, contrast adjustments, shadow and highlights adjustments. Those I believe that you can change in your auto mode. And then of course we have our metering mode where it's taking the light from. I personally like to be on center metering because most of my stuff is directly in the center, as you can see. Otherwise, you have all over metering where it's considering the light from everywhere, or spot metering, which means if I wanted my camera over here and I wanted this to be proper lighting, then I could. But notice if I move my camera to the middle, now it's metering properly for the camera. So I personally just like to have it on center for what I personally do. Okay. And also your universal exit button is actually going to be your shutter button halfway down. So if we push that halfway down, it gets right back into shooting mode. It's a great way to exit out really quickly. And then you'll notice down here we have our ISO button availability. So you can set your ISO or keep it on auto. I would personally keep it on auto myself. Just gives you less to worry about. I believe you should be able to set a limit. You should be able to set a limit to how high your ISO will go in auto, but we'll find that out when we go into the menu here. Right, so your button up here, it's going to look like a little cell phone. This is going to be a direct connection, so you can connect it to your app. So you would hit this button, access the app, transfer photos, whatever you want to do on there. So it's like a little shortcut button for that. This button here, you know, I gotta tell you, I actually can't find what this one does. I gotta be honest. I don't know everything, I know quite a bit, but this button is kind of a mystery to me. And naturally, I don't own this camera, I don't have a manual or anything like that. But from what I can tell, it's going to be something similar to the button that's going to be right here. If any of you know exactly what this button does, let me know. If you want to know, I will do my research and I will post in the comments below. Here we can access like our focus areas if you want to be specific with a certain area or where it's going to autofocus. This is going to be programmable, so in P mode, if you hit this button, that's going to allow you to change either shutter speed or aperture, so just something to keep in mind. Go back. Let's see here. You have your playback button, so that'll allow you to look back on pictures. Naturally, there is no memory card in this right now, so there's not going to be any pictures to look back at. We have our menu button, which we'll go over here in just a moment. You have your shortcut buttons on your second adjustment wheel, so this is also adjustment wheel like the top one is. So if you push up on this, that's going to be able to change your ISO as well. If you push to the right, that's going to change our flash settings. And I believe that when you put the flash up, that will be able to give you these options here. Auto flash, force flash on, turning your flash off, and then when you close that, it automatically turns your flash off and doesn't give you those options anymore. So your flash options will only be available after you've popped up the flash, so keep that in mind. If you push on the left here with a flower, that's actually going to change your macro focus or your normal focus. So macro focus allows you to get really, really close to objects, which this actually does fairly well. I believe it has like a 1-2 inch space that you can get your lens from the subject before it focuses on macro mode. So if you're trying to get a really close picture of a flower or an insect, that's going to be your setting there to put it on. If we push down, this is going to control both our drive mode and our focus mode. So one shot is actually going to be autofocus single. That's going to focus and lock on to a subject. That's going to be good for people that are posing, landscapes, still lifes, that sort of thing there. And then you have servo, which is going to be continuous autofocus. This is going to continually focus as a subject moves, so good for sports, animals, that sort of thing. And then, of course, we have our drive mode. The single square is going to be taking one picture when we press and hold the button down, versus the multiple frames, which is a continuous drive. That's our like 5.9 frames per second. When you click and hold the button down, that's how many pictures it'll take, as long as you hold the button down. And then of course we have our display button. So if we hit this button, it just changes the available display on here, which it looks like there's just 2 options. So not too many options there to worry about. And now we'll go ahead and dive into the menu. So the menu itself, like any menu, can have a lot to it. However, a lot of these things in the menu are also in our quick menu. So notice that if I go back here, that quick menu that's at the top here, we also can access it by hitting the center button. So you don't have to use the touchscreen if you don't want to. So going into our menu, here we have our image quality, just like in our quick menu, the aspect ratio, shooting information display, reverse display for when you flip the screen up. You have review image after shooting. You can adjust how much time it pops up for. Touch shutter, personally I like to have this off, but it essentially means that when you touch the screen, it focuses and takes a picture right away. I like to have a little bit more control in using the shutter button. You have Face ID settings. Function assignment, so there are different function buttons on this that you can assign and create your own shortcuts. Your save settings, digital zoom you always want off. Right now it's not even giving us that option, which is fine. Autofocus point zoom, You have your autofocus operation, which is right now you can change by pushing the down button, which is set to 1 shot. Autofocus method, 1-point autofocus. You can also set it to tracking, you know, so same as the quick menu. Autofocus frame size, continuous autofocus. That's a great one to have on, by the way. Autofocus and manual focus, having that available. So that just means that when you hit that manual focus button, it'll allow you to dial in your focus with the ring up front. Autofocus assist beam, so it has a little LED that it shines out. If it detects that the space doesn't have enough detail without more light, it'll shine out a light to be able to get a more accurate focus. Let's see. We have a manual point zoom, which is like at the 2 times, so when you do hit that button, it zooms in just so you can make sure that what you have is in focus. Safety manual focus. Yeah, recall zoom, so you can change that button on the lens here of what you want that zoom to be at. Right now it's set to close to 85. Manual focus peaking settings, image stabilization settings, which if you're on a tripod, you do want this to be off. Now, because of the B-roll, that's, you know, definitely a situation where you would want it off because I was using a tripod. So something to keep in mind there. And then to go back, you just hit your menu. Bracketing, which just takes pictures at what it recommends, one a little bit brighter, one a little bit darker. You can do that in tough lighting situations. ISO speed, here we go. So if you want to change your max ISO here, for this camera, I would say like don't get any higher than like 1600, 2000. You know, because then you'll start getting noisier, mucky images, and then that way at least you can keep your ISO on auto. You don't even have to worry about it. Okay. And we have like our light metering, same thing on quick menu, ND filter, your flash control, white balance, your blink detection. So what it'll do is it'll let you know, oh, someone blinked in your photo, you better retake it. If you take a lot of pictures of people or groups of people. Let's see here. You have your movie quality and your sound quality. And then we are jumping into the little wrench menu, which is just going to be general settings. So you can have it create a folder monthly or daily, depending on what you want to do there. File numbering if you want it continuous or reset it. You know, your startup image. Economical modes, save battery. You can do your LCD brightness to adjust if it needs to be brighter or dimmer. Your time zone, date and time. Like right now, the date and time is really off. The lens retraction, so when you would like the lens to retract if you've left it, you know, just sitting there for a certain amount of time. The language, to mute it, to adjust the volume, you know, settings for the headphones, having hints and tips on, which just help you guide you through this sort of stuff. Touch operation, just keeping it on standard, or you can just turn it off if you don't want to use the touch screen. Your Wi-Fi settings, so another general way to connect it to your phone. Your copyright info, if say you change a setting and you have no idea what you did, you can always go to reset all and get it back to factory settings. And then you have my menu settings, which allow you to pick certain things out of your menus here and save them into my menu so they're easier to find. Very similar to your quick menu. Other than that, this camera is fairly simple, but it also has some complex features if you want to learn more about like your manual modes and whatnot, and you just don't want to shoot on auto anymore. It gives you a lot of information there. With the 1-inch sensor, it gives you a lot more availability than just your typical point and shoot, not to mention the zoom range, which is just fantastic. If you have any questions or you want me to cover a different camera, definitely let me know in the comments below. And until then, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.